So we started to come back down the mountain, and it's really easy to think when you're coming downhill that there's no more risk. Because when you're coming downhill, everything feels easier. It's sunnier, it's warmer, the terrain's easier. Everything just feels a lot more calm. But what you have to remember is that when you are in these unpredictable environments, even when things feel calm, there's still risk. And the climb is not over until you walk in the front door of your house. So the Khumbu ice fall, that area with all the big, huge moving ice chunks and the ladders, we'd gone through that thing 7 times, no problems. 8th time, completely different story. My teammate Jody and I were out in front and the rest of the team just a few minutes behind us. All of a sudden, we hear this sound like a big moving freight train or something. We turn around only to see 10,000 tons of ice coming down in this huge ice avalanche, and we thought for sure we were going to be crushed. So we were trying to figure out how to get out of the way. But you can't run in that ice fall, right? Because of all the ladders and the crevasses you have to cross really slowly and carefully. You can't run out of the way. So we are completely panicking. And there was this video guy there from National Geographic, and he saw us freaking out. So he yelled to us. He just yelled, "Whoa, whoa, 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 don't move, stay where you are, stay right where you are." Jody and I grab each other. We're shaking, crying, hyperventilating. That whole ice avalanche came to a stop about 5 feet from us. That's how close we were to getting killed. It was really scary. Like, clean up on aisle 4. Kind of scary. So we're completely freaking out, and I look over the video guy and I said, "Oh my God, how did you stay so calm?" And I will never forget this because he looked me in the eye and replied, "I knew it was going to be okay." And I'm thinking, how the hell could he have known that? Right? He was right there in the ice fall with us, and he almost got crushed as well. And about a month later, I was laughing my head off because I read this article he wrote about the day the Khumbu icefall collapsed, and I just thought it was kind of funny the way he described the whole sequence of events, because he wrote, "Jody and Allison panicked and looked for somewhere to run, but I urged them to remain calm because I knew for sure we were all gonna die." What? What? So then we get back from the trip and we have to do the post-expedition media tour because we were the first American women's Everest expedition. So we had all this media coverage before we left for Nepal. Hundreds of media outlets from all over the world followed our climb, and then we missed the top by that much. So you have to go back to all the same TV shows and talk about what happened. And it just felt like such a gut punch to have this high-profile failure where the media has you splashed all over the headlines talking about the fact that you did not make it, you did not get there, you did not achieve your goal. And I was just so tired of explaining it over and over. And I mean, no one seemed to focus on the fact that we were the first team of American women to even try something like this. It was an altitude record for every member of my team. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Yeah, everyone was just focused on the failure. So the media interviews would all go like this. I would walk in, and whoever was hosting the morning show that we were at would say, like, "Welcome back." Aww. And then I'd say, "Well, I mean, it was a pretty amazing experience." "I know, but..." And I'd say, "Well, it was an altitude record for every single member of my team here, and we just feel so fortunate that we even got a chance to go to the mountain and give it a shot." And then they would say, "Yeah, but to get that close and not make it, how does that make you feel?" "Like a loser! That's how it makes me feel." So happy to finally be done with these interviews and not have to talk about Mount Everest anymore. I just want to go back to my normal social life. So I get home, and this friend of mine invited me to this dinner party. So I show up at this dinner party, and the guy that was hosting it when I walked in, he introduced me to the other guests. So I walk in, and the host goes, "Oh, this is my friend Allison. She just climbed Mount Everest." And then the guy sitting across the table from me said, "Oh, no way, all the way to the top?" Right, so then I have to explain again. Well, no, unfortunately, we were forced to turn around just a couple hundred feet from the top in a storm. And he said, "Oh, so you didn't climb Mount Everest?" And I was like, no. I told him the whole story about how we spent 2 months on the mountain, just had super lousy luck with the weather. I gave him that whole lecture about getting to the top is optional, getting down is mandatory. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that quote was made famous by an incredible climber named Ed Viesturs. I love that quote. So I was like, yeah, getting down is mandatory. And he said, yeah, but if you weren't at the very top, then you didn't climb it. It doesn't count. So I was like, okay, what do you do, tough guy? And he said, I work for JP Morgan. So of course I said, no way, you are the CEO of JP Morgan? You know exactly where this is going. You know exactly where this is going. So he said, no, I'm not the CEO. I work in fixed income trading. And I said, oh, well then, I guess you don't really work for JP Morgan then, do you? Because if you're not at the very top, then it doesn't count. I wish you all had been there that night. So he's like, oh, that's totally different. Whatever with that guy. Whatever with JP Morgan guy. We don't care about him. Then, of course, all my friends wanted the scoop. So this is Meg, one of my best friends, one of the first people I saw when I got off the mountain. She said, tell me everything. I want to hear all the stories. So I was telling her all about the trip, and she said, oh, man, so are you going back next year to try it again? And I said, no. Make that hell no. I am not going back next year to try it again. And she said, oh, okay, so then you're going the year after? I said, I have 0 unfinished business on that mountain. I'm not going back there. She said, I know you. You're going to want to give that one another try. I said, okay, only if you go with me. Because this is one of the most amazing athletes I ever met in my entire life. She grew up playing soccer, went on to become an All-American soccer player in college and captain of her soccer team. She also beat lymphoma twice in her 20s. Yeah. Amazing, right? Yeah. But as a result of her lymphoma treatment, so she had stem cell transplant, chemo, and radiation. As a result of that treatment, she had some lung damage. And because of her compromised lung function, she could no longer play soccer, which was really what she'd been most passionate about. But Meg found that even with her reduced lung capacity, she could still ride a bike pretty well. And she put so much heart and soul into cycling and became so good at it that in 2005, she was one of a handful of cyclists chosen to ride cross-country from San Diego to Washington, D.C. with Lance Armstrong. And she did not use performance-enhancing drugs. But then, go figure, she got the flu. She passed away at age 37 from the stupid flu. The regular old flu that any of us could have kicked, but because she had that lung damage, she ended up with a severe lung infection that she just wasn't able to recover from. And Meg was one of those super gregarious people that had friends all over the world. And after she died, people started doing things to honor this girl all over the world. They were doing cycling races in Japan in her honor. They were doing triathlons in Europe in her honor. They were running the New York Marathon in her honor. And I wanted to do something to honor my friend as well. And of course, the thing that I am most passionate about is climbing mountains. So I decided to go back to Mount Everest just a couple of months after losing Meg. And I engraved her name in my ice axe to make sure that she was indeed coming with me this time around. Thanks. Thank you so much. So here's a shot of us heading up over this area called the Geneva Spur on our way to the high camp in the spring of 2010. And then I get up to the high camp and go figure. In comes a storm again. And I thought, I cannot believe I am back here 8 years later in the same exact situation, right? Ready to go for the summit, in comes a storm. But of course, as we all know, we cannot control the environment, only the way we react to it. And most teams just abandon their summit attempt altogether, but I thought, hell, I'm back here after 8 years. I'm at least gonna get out of this tent and try. So I get out of my tent, managed to climb for about 2 hours or so before things started to really deteriorate. Winds picked up, started to dump snow, dumped about a foot of snow. It was in horrible condition. But after 2 hours, I saw all these other headlamps out there and I thought, yes, this is a really good sign because this means there are other people out here who feel like this mountain can be climbed in this storm. But then I realized that all of those headlamps I was looking at were pointing toward me. They were just people that started out 2 hours before I did, that were turning around and calling it quits. And we met up at this one spot on the mountain called the Triangular Face. And they said, look, we were up there a bit further. We don't feel like this mountain can be climbed in this storm, so we're pulling the plug on this whole thing. We're heading back down. We hope we are doing the right thing. And I said, okay, I'm gonna go up just a little bit further, and I hope that I'm doing the right thing. And you can see how the clouds are completely closed in. Visibility was horrible. But as I approached the south summit, I hear this voice, Allison. Hey, Allison. And at first I thought I was just hearing voices, maybe hallucinating. This isn't unusual when your brain is so oxygen starved up there in the death zone. People hear things and see visions all the time. And I thought, oh, this is just my brain playing tricks on me. But the voice gets louder, Allison. And now I'm thinking, who is up here calling my name? Well, I get to the South Summit. It was this Canadian mountain guide named Michael Horst. And he waited there for me because he knew my story. And he knew that I had turned around at that point, at the South Summit, 8 years prior. And he anticipated that I might be feeling a little bit of fear and anxiety because the visibility was so bad and I did not know what was beyond that point. And he waited there for me, and so I said, what? What do you want, Michael? And he said, I need you to make me a promise. And I'm thinking, who can ask anything of me right now? And he said, you gotta promise me that you are gonna go further than this. And it just, like having somebody there to cheer for me that I knew wanted to see me succeed. We shake hands on this promise, and I never break a promise to a friend. So here's a close-up of me on the summit ridge. It is an 8,000-foot drop to the left of me, 10,000-foot drop to the right, and I really could not see too far in front of me at all. But that's when I realized that you don't have to know what's coming at you down the trail in order to keep moving toward an important goal. You don't have to know. You just take it as it comes. And here's the thing. If you have clarity in your intent, you do not need absolute clarity in the path forward. If you wait around for absolute clarity, you may be waiting around forever, and you don't need perfect visibility to just put one foot in front of the other. So that's what I did for about another 9 hours or so, and I'm happy to report that on May 24th of 2010, thank you so much. You're unbelievable. You guys are making me cry. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Yeah. May 24th of 2010, I did make it to the summit of Mount Everest in honor of my girlfriend, Meg. So take that, JP Morgan guy. That's right. And for me, that summit was the completion of what's known as the Adventure Grand Slam, which is climbing the 7 summits. That's the highest peak on every continent. And then skiing to both the North and the South Pole. I think there's a couple dozen people in the world now who have completed the Adventure Grand Slam, but at the time, there were only a couple of us. So that photo was on the front page of the New York Times sports section. So people would see that picture and ask me, what was that like? What was it like to go back to that mountain 8 years later after everything you had been through, fight your way through the storm, and finally stand on top of the highest mountain in the world? And I can honestly tell you, it just wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't, because think about it for a second. Let's keep this in perspective, shall we? This is a pile of rock and ice. Standing on top of a pile of rock and ice doesn't change the world. You know what does change the world? Lots of other stuff. Technology, innovation, advances in healthcare and wellness. Give yourselves a hand right now. You're the ones that deserve the standing ovation. You deserve the standing ovation, you do. Because what you are doing every day when you are climbing the mountains that you are climbing is having incredible impact. You really are changing the world. And I am so honored to be standing up here on this stage in front of all of you incredible people. You guys keep climbing and keep doing what you're doing. Do not ever back down, because you're having impact. Yeah. And here's one of the biggest things I think also that can change the world. How about just sharing a few kind words of encouragement to somebody who's having a tough time? Let me tell you, being there to cheer on somebody who's struggling can completely change the outcome of a situation. I would argue could completely change somebody's life. I mean, all these things I've mentioned and many other things as well are things that really do have a lot of impact. Now, while standing up there didn't feel like this big life-changing moment for me, I'll tell you what was important about it, and it is, of course, the lessons you learn along the way when you're fighting like hell to get up there. And what you're going to do with that information to be better going forward. The only reason I made it up that day when most people turned back is because I had that failure under my belt from 2002. Because of that previous failure, I knew a heck of a lot more about my pain threshold, about my risk tolerance. I knew what it felt like to get the living snot kicked out of me high up on that summit ridge in a storm. And I wasn't afraid of that the second time around. And I think in general, we're not always really a very failure-tolerant society, which is really too bad, because it's that lack of failure tolerance that stifles progress and innovation and prevents people from taking risks. Anyone that knows just a little something about the history of Mount Everest will know the names Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, right? First guys to ever summit the mountain in 1953. But guess what? Sir Edmund Hillary had 2 recon expeditions to Everest before he summited, and Tenzing Norgay had 6 failed attempts on the mountain before he summited with a successful summit on his 7th attempt. Can you imagine if he had given up? after any of those initial 6 tries, but he didn't. He made it to the top and he made history. Do not ever give up after your failures, right? We just learn from them and we're better going forward. And you never know who's going to be following in your footsteps, who will go on to achieve incredible things because of your past experience, even if you didn't have the exact outcome that you wanted at the time. And the most important thing I need to tell you about that photo is that it's actually very misleading, because this is photoshopped. No, just kidding, it's not. It's not photoshopped. It's not photoshopped, I promise. No, it's a real photo, I promise it's a real photo. But it is misleading because while you do see me on the summit of Mount Everest, let me tell you what you don't see. You don't see the financial sponsors that funded my trip, the logistics providers that got our permits in order, the amazing team of Sherpas who helped us ferry loads up and down the mountain. You don't see the guides that gave us direction along the way. A lot of people had a hand in that. And you may not see them in the photo there, but what you have to remember is that nobody gets to the top of this mountain by themselves. Nobody does. All right, I have one last slide for you all. It's this one here. If I had to sum up all the lessons I've learned on all the mountains I've ever been to, sum everything up into one slide, that would be it. That triangular shadow that you see, that is the shadow of the summit of Mount Everest. And we snapped that photo shortly before we started to descend during our failed summit bid in 2002. That image, that shadow, pretty much permanently ingrained in my brain, because for me, this is a reminder that sometimes things are going to go your way, sometimes things are not going to go your way. That is part of climbing mountains, that's certainly part of your business, it's just part of life. But you have to be willing to get out there and push yourself on these peaks day after day, even when it feels uncomfortable. And you have got to be able to weather the storms if you're ever going to have an opportunity to enjoy this kind of view. And I think my biggest takeaway from the entire experience, which I hope will be one of your takeaways as well, is that you don't have to be the best, fastest, strongest climber out there on the trails every day. You just have to be absolutely relentless about putting one foot in front of the other. And that is how you get to the top of a mountain. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. Aw, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you.